The unknown wears many faces. Sometimes it's a whisper from the past, a family memory of a house that never quite settled. Other times, it's an urban legend that reaches out from crumbling ruins to follow you home. It can be the slow, creeping dread of years spent in a place where logic unravels, or the shocking realization that the monster you feared is far more real and far closer than you ever imagined. And occasionally, survival itself hinges on a bizarre set of rules in a place designed for fear. Tonight, we explore 5 such unsettling realities. Prepare yourselves. And if these accounts leave you questioning the shadows in your own life, please support our journey by hitting that like button and subscribe for more chronicles of the strange. It's been a while since I shared anything here on No Sleep, but time has a way of unearthing old memories, old chills. This particular tale isn't mine directly, but it comes straight from my father, a man not prone to exaggeration, whose experiences in a certain house in northern New Jersey still raise the hairs on his arms when he recounts them. This happened around 1980, in a neighborhood I believe was Denville. My father was an immigrant back then, having made the journey to the United States with most of his family, seeking a new life, a new start. He was the second youngest of 12 children, a stark contrast to his oldest sibling, a brother who had carved out a significant name for himself in the business world. This brother was, by all accounts, a millionaire, a man who embodied the American dream, at least on the surface. He owned a sprawling $1 million house, a place that had previously belonged to a well-regarded doctor, and his driveway was a rotating display of new cars, Buicks, Oldsmobiles, even an Eagle. He cultivated the image of a model family, complete with a wife, 2 adopted children, and a loyal dog. But behind the facade, things weren't always as they seemed. This successful brother, for all his wealth, often neglected the simpler responsibilities, and so my dad, younger and still finding his footing, found himself in the unofficial role of caretaker for his brother's lavish lifestyle. It wasn't a formal arrangement, more an expectation. He'd be the one filling the gas tanks of those gleaming cars, the one feeding the dog when its owner was out, which was often. His brother, you see, was a social creature, frequently out networking, entertaining, or simply absent, leaving the grand house feeling mostly empty, save for the echoes of its former occupants and, as it turned out, perhaps something more. Because of this, my dad spent a considerable amount of time at that house. He was there a lot, pottering about, ensuring things ran smoothly in his brother's absence. A few times, circumstances led to him spending the night. Emphasis on few, because when he did, things got weird. One particular occasion stands out in his memory. His brother's father-in-law was also staying at the house, along with my dad and my uncle's wife. I'm not clear if the children were there at that specific time. The details are a bit hazy on that point. The house was large enough to accommodate guests comfortably, of course. There was a designated guest room, and the father-in-law stayed there. My dad, being family and perhaps lower on the pecking order, took the couch in the living room. He told me he simply could not sleep that night. It wasn't just the unfamiliarity of the couch, or the usual creaks and groans of an older house. Settling. It was a profound restlessness, an unshakable sense of unease that permeated the very air he breathed. He tossed and turned, drifting into shallow, unsatisfying bouts of sleep. only to be jolted awake by an indefinable sense of wrongness. The silence of the house felt charged, expectant. He managed, by sheer exhaustion, to get a few fitful hours of rest before dawn. The next morning, as the household stirred, the father-in-law approached him. The man looked tired, his eyes shadowed. He spoke in a low, serious tone. "I don't know about you," he said to my dad, "but I won't be staying at this house again." There was no elaboration, no detailed account of what he might have experienced in the guest room. Just a quiet, firm declaration. And true to his word, my dad says, the man never did spend another night under that roof. Whatever had transpired in that guest room, or whatever feeling the house had imparted upon him, it was enough to make a grown man unreservedly refuse its hospitality. Another incident involved my dad doing some work around the property. He was often tasked with yard work or tidying up, and on this day, he was cleaning out the basement. This house, like many large homes of its era, had a finished basement area, a den complete with a fireplace, a cozy retreat, one might imagine. He'd been at it for hours, a significant amount of physical labor, and he was tired. Seeing the relatively clean expanse of the basement floor, he decided to take a quick nap, just for a few minutes to recharge before tackling the rest of his chores. He lay down on the cool concrete and drifted off. He described what happened next, not as a normal dream, but as something far more vivid, more surreal. He felt as though he was asleep, yet simultaneously aware, able to perceive the room around him, as if his consciousness was hovering just above his resting body. It was in this strange, liminal state that he saw it. From the depths of the cold, dark fireplace, a figure began to emerge, not from the opening, but as if it were coming down the chimney itself. He described it as a gnarled, twisted little man, small in stature but radiating an intense, unsettling energy. The figure, he said, looked shockingly like the character Rumpelstiltskin from the old fairy tales, mischievous, grotesque, and ancient, and it was laughing, a dry, cackling laugh that seemed to echo in that space between sleep and wakefulness, a laugh directed solely at him. He woke with a violent start, his heart pounding, every nerve ending tingling with alarm. He sat bolt upright, his eyes darting around the empty basement den. There was nothing, no gnarled figure, no lingering laughter, just the quiet hum of the house and the cold fireplace. But the image, the feeling of that surreal encounter, was seared into his mind. It was so vivid, so unsettlingly real, that it marked a turning point. After that day, he stopped sleeping at the house altogether, if he could possibly avoid it. The couch, the guest rooms, none of them felt safe anymore. That basement in particular held a new kind of dread for him. He woke with a violent start, his heart pounding, every nerve ending tingling with alarm. He sat bolt upright, his eyes darting around the empty basement den. There was nothing, no gnarled figure, no lingering laughter, just the quiet hum of the house and the cold fireplace. But the image, the feeling of that surreal encounter, was seared into his mind. It was so vivid, so unsettlingly real, that it marked a turning point. After that day, he stopped sleeping at the house altogether if he could possibly avoid it. The couch, the guest rooms, none of them felt safe anymore. That basement in particular held a new kind of dread for him. Adding another layer to the house's strangeness was his brother's association with a medium, a clairvoyant woman who was a regular friend of the family. She would visit the house often, and my dad remarked on some odd pronouncements she made. One of the most peculiar things he recalled was the medium claiming she had made a friend for his brother's young, adopted daughter. Now, children often have imaginary friends. It's a normal part of growing up. But this felt different, given the context of the house and the clairvoyant's statement. And frequently, my dad said, the little girl would be seen standing in a corner of a room, facing the wall, whispering and talking animatedly, as if in deep conversation with someone only she could see. Was it an innocent childhood fantasy? Or was this friend something else? Something invited into the house by the medium? It was a question that lingered, unanswered. My dad wasn't the only one in the family to have an unsettling experience there. His sister, my aunt, related an incident that happened during one of her visits. She had stopped over for lunch and was sitting at the dining table with the clairvoyant. They were engaged in casual conversation when, all of a sudden, the large, ornate chandelier hanging directly above the table began to swing. Not a gentle sway, as if from a draft, but wildly from side to side, with a momentum that seemed utterly impossible. There were no open windows, no vibrations, no logical reason for it to be moving like that. My aunt, understandably alarmed, just stared at the swinging chandelier, her lunch forgotten. The clairvoyant, however, merely glanced up at it, then looked back at my aunt with a calm, almost nonchalant expression. "Oh, don't worry about that," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "That's just some of my friends saying hello." Some of her friends. The casualness of the remark, the implication that unseen entities were not only present, but also familiar acquaintances of the medium, sent a fresh wave of unease through my aunt. Those are the main stories my father and aunt shared about that house in Denville. Eventually, my uncle ran into financial difficulties. The lavish lifestyle, the millionaire status. It wasn't as stable as it appeared. He had to sell the house and move his family elsewhere. They didn't stay there for a very long period after these events. A few years, I believe my dad said, but the exact timeline is a bit fuzzy now. Individually, perhaps some of these incidents could be rationalized away. A bad dream, an old house's quirks, a child's imagination. But taken together, they paint a picture of a place with a deeply unsettled atmosphere. A house that seemed to hold more than just its living occupants. The story that always gets me, the one that truly leaves its mark, is my dad's encounter with that Rumpelstiltskin-like being in the basement. Every single time he tells it, even now, decades later, his eyes turn wide with a remembered fear. You can literally see the hair stand up on his arms. The terror he felt in that moment is still palpable, and it scares you yourself, just seeing him relive it. It's a visceral reaction that tells you, more than any words could, that something profound and deeply disturbing happened to him in that house. You just know something was going on there. Probably a lot more than what was ever spoken aloud or fully understood. Some houses, it seems, just hold on to things. Thanks for reading. If I recall any more details or hear further tales from my family's strange past, I'll be sure to share them. I live in a small city in Pennsylvania, a place much like any other, woven with its own tapestry of local legends, stories passed down and reshaped with each retelling. One particular legend always seemed to capture my imagination, a chilling tale that would frequently find its way back into my thoughts. It concerned a place known locally as the Durham House. The house, or what remains of it, sits on a winding, terribly paved stretch called Funk Mill Road, just past an old farm. The story, as it's always told, is a deeply tragic one. Years ago, in the dead of a harsh winter, the house caught fire. Inside were a mother and her children. The father, working late or perhaps away on business, received word that his home was ablaze. He rushed back, desperate to reach his family, but on the icy, treacherous roads, his car slid out of control, resulting in a fatal accident. The entire family, it's said, perished that single horrific night. The mother and children in the inferno, the father on the frozen asphalt. The legend further whispers that if you visit the site of the house at night, you might witness the ghostly reenactment of the father's desperate drive, his car careening up the street before the inevitable spectral crash. Or you might glimpse the sorrowful apparitions of the mother and her children wandering the desolate ruins. Naturally, a place with such a grim reputation became a magnet for teenagers, those looking for a genuine scare, or perhaps just a secluded abandoned spot to gather, away from prying adult eyes. I, Molly, was one of those teenagers drawn by the promise of a good fright. It was a warm, still summer night. A few friends and I, finding ourselves with nothing better to do, decided that the time was right to finally make our pilgrimage to the infamous Durham House. None of us had ever been there before, and navigating the poorly marked back roads in the dark proved a bit challenging. But eventually, after a few wrong turns and nervous laughs, we stumbled upon it. Even from a distance, the mere sight of the place, a skeletal silhouette against the moonlit sky, sent an involuntary shiver up my spine. We parked the car a little way down the road, the engine ticking softly in the sudden silence, and crept through the overgrown weeds and encroaching darkness towards the ruins. The air grew colder as we approached, or perhaps it was just our nerves. The place was every bit as creepy and decrepit as you'd expect a supposedly haunted, burned-down house to be. Charred timbers clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers. Sections of walls stood precariously, and the scent of old smoke, damp earth, and decay hung heavy in the air. We moved as a tight group, walking around the perimeter of what was once a home, our flashlights cutting nervous beams through the darkness. We explored what little we could, given its ruinous state, grasping each other for dear life at every rustle in the undergrowth, every snap of a twig, purposely trying to freak each other out, our anxious giggles echoing unnaturally in the stillness. Despite our best efforts to amplify the spookiness, we didn't see anything definitively strange. The only fear we truly felt was the kind manufactured by our own overactive imaginations, fueled by the legend and the eerie ambiance. However, amidst the rubble and debris, I did find something, a crumpled-up piece of notebook paper, yellowed and brittle with age, lying half-hidden under a fallen piece of charred wood. Curious, I picked it up, smoothed it out as best I could, and shone my flashlight onto its surface. In what looked like a young child's messy, uneven handwriting, it read, "Daddy, Daddy, fly away home. Your house is on fire, and your children are gone, all except one, and that's little Anne, for she crept under the frying pan." The words, combined with the childish scrawl and the desolate surroundings, definitely creeped us out enough. A sudden, unspoken consensus rippled through our group. Without a word, we turned and ran, a jumble of flailing limbs and panicked breaths. back to the relative safety of the car. We scrambled inside, locking the doors, our hearts pounding. Then, as often happens when perceived danger has passed, the nervous tension broke, and we collapsed into laughter, laughing at our silliness, at how easily we'd been spooked. We rationalized that some other kids, probably the same kind of thrill seekers as us, must have written the note and left it there deliberately to scare anyone else who might come exploring. On the drive back, a little more composed, we studied the piece of paper again under the car's dome light. I, trying to prolong the spooky mood and impress my friends with my storytelling, decided to embellish. With the straightest face I could manage, I wove an elaborate tale about a little girl named Anne, who had supposedly lived in the Durham house, a detail not commonly part of the main legend. I told them that many locals claimed to see her ghost still playing among the ruins, and, for an extra shiver, I added that several people had reported that the ghost of little Anne would sometimes follow them home. My friends, caught between skepticism and a lingering unease, played along, either feigning belief or perhaps feeling a genuine flicker of it. When I got home that night, the house quiet and my family asleep, the rhyme on the paper we'd found still nagged at me. It sounded familiar. A quick search on the internet confirmed it. It was a very popular, very old nursery rhyme. Except in the original version, the first line was, "Ladybug, ladybug, fly away home, not daddy, daddy." The substitution was unsettling, especially given the Durham family's story. Then I idly turned the edged piece of paper over. My blood ran cold. There, on the back, written in the exact same childish chicken scratch handwriting as the nursery rhyme, was a single word: Molly. My name. That was definitely not there when I found the note in the ruins. I would have seen it. My friends and I had examined both sides. A part of my mind immediately tried to rationalize. One of my friends must have sneakily written it on the drive back, trying to pull a prank on me, to get back at me for my own embellished story. It had to be. But another deeper part of me couldn't shake the profound, chilling feeling that something truly weird, something inexplicable, was going on. Scared witless, I called my then-boyfriend on Skype, needing a dose of normalcy, of his usual down-to-earth skepticism. I recounted the night's adventure, the ruins, the note, and finally, my name appearing on it. Not surprisingly, he laughed. He told me not to let it freak me out so much, that ghosts weren't real, that it was all in my head, probably my friends messing with me, all the usual reassurances that, at that moment, offered very little comfort. At some point during our call, his expression shifted slightly. "Hey," he said, "did your sister just run down the hall?" "Past your door." This was a little weird, since it was well past midnight, but my 7-year-old sister, Cassie, often ignored the bedtime rules. Thinking nothing more of it, I just yelled over my shoulder, without looking away from my laptop screen, "Cassie, get back in bed." My boyfriend shrugged it off, and we continued talking. Not long after, I ended the call, powered down my laptop, and prepared for what I was sure would be a terrible night's sleep. As a final check, I decided to peek into my sister's room to make sure she was actually in bed. Her room was empty. Her bed was neatly made, untouched. That's when the ice truly settled in my veins. I remembered, with a sudden sickening lurch, that my parents and my sister were in Maine. They were visiting my grandmother for the entire weekend. Cassie had not been in the house all day, let alone running past my door minutes ago. I locked all the doors and windows in a frantic haze, my hands trembling. I ran to my bed, noped out loud to the empty house, and pulled the covers tightly over my head, eventually succumbing to an exhausted, uneasy sleep. I very rarely remember my dreams, but the nightmare I had that night was so vivid, so terrifyingly real, that when I woke up, I was convinced it had actually happened. In the dream, I was back at the Durham House ruins, alone this time. A little girl with dark, sad eyes was sitting on what was left of the charred staircase, staring directly at me. She kept saying in a high, sing-song voice, "Play with me, play with me," and giggling, a sound that was both innocent and deeply unsettling. She had a bright red kickball, and she rolled it towards me. In the strange logic of dreams, I rolled it back. She giggled again, then got up and ran towards me, her small figure a blur. She didn't stop. She ran right through me. I woke up with a gasp, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs. My right hand was clenched tightly, and I was clutching a pen. It was 2 a.m. I'd only been asleep for about an hour. Confused and disoriented, I reached over and fumbled for the lamp next to my bed, flooding the room with a weak, yellow light. Sitting on my nightstand, next to the lamp, was an open notebook I didn't remember leaving there. And on the blank page, scrawled in what was unmistakably my own handwriting, were the words, "Play with me." Moments later, as I stared at the notebook in disbelief, a small bright red ball rolled slowly into my open bedroom doorway from the impenetrable darkness of the hallway. It came to a gentle stop a few feet inside my room, a silent, chilling invitation. I want to start off by pointing out something that should be obvious. There's a vast difference between real-life hauntings and what you see on the big screen. It's not just that movies are populated by impossibly good-looking people and riddled with every cliché imaginable, but movies also like to tie everything up neatly at the end. They might not always have happy endings, but they almost always give you a reason for what's happening. A body under the floorboards, an ancient burial ground, a history of violence, a cursed heirloom. The list goes on. That's not how it works in the real world. At least it wasn't in my experience. My story begins a few weeks before I moved into a new house and ends the day I moved out. Because sometimes there are simply no answers to why a house is the way it is. I believe I lived in a haunted house for 5 years. These are my experiences. It started in the year 2000. As an army brat, I was used to the moving conversation. My parents, both retired Army, sat my sister and me down to announce we were relocating again. Usually we were shown a photo of the new house. This time the news came with a confusing mid-school year timeline, but I didn't question it. Moving was our status quo. With every move, a part of me hoped it would be the last, that we'd finally settle. That hope died the moment I saw this particular house in person. Firstly, it was a rental, inherently temporary. More importantly, the place looked like it was falling apart. I vividly remember newspapers spread across the kitchen floor beneath a yellowed, low-hanging light fixture that was actively dripping water. My assigned bedroom was painted a stark, oppressive black, and the previous tenant had scrawled bleak, unsettling verses on the walls in multicolored wax crayons. While the image of some emo kid earnestly doodling with crayons seems almost comical now, at the time, it royally creeped me out. The stairs groaned underfoot, the ceilings looked water-stained, and the entire house was shrouded in a layer of dust, thick enough to rival an attic. We were a middle-class family, moving from a lovely home with a swimming pool to this den of grime. To make matters worse, we found out the previous tenants had simply vanished, withholding rent for months before disappearing with all their belongings, untraceable. A great start indeed. Thankfully, by moving day, the owner had made some improvements. The leaky fixture was gone, the grime cleaned, and a fresh coat of white paint covered the unsettling poems and the black walls. Yet one room still radiated an unnerving discomfort, the laundry room at the foot of the basement stairs. Whenever I went near it, I'd get that creepy, crawly sensation, like unseen eyes breathing down my neck. I'd often dash past its door, and if I absolutely had to go inside, I'd prop the door open with my leg, just in case. Aside from that laundry room, the house felt fairly normal at first. The usual strange noises, settling sounds, water in pipes, eventually faded into background hum as we adjusted. It's a survival instinct, I think. Our brains on high alert in a new environment until familiarity breeds a certain level of dismissal. If I had to pinpoint when things truly changed, it was a couple of months after we moved in. I've always been a terrible sleeper. It takes me over an hour to fall asleep, no matter how exhausted I am. That night, I went to bed around 10, expecting to drift off by 11. I was still wide awake, staring into the darkness, when I heard a sound unlike any the house had made before. A distinct knock at my bedroom door. Along with it came a man's voice, low and unfamiliar. "Are you asleep?" he asked. I turned over, still mostly in that pre-sleep daze. Number. "Let me in," he continued. "Dad?" I mumbled, my eyes still closed. It didn't quite sound like him, but who else could it be? "Can I come in?" the voice pressed. "Okay," I replied, assuming it was my father. I heard quiet footsteps approach my bed. Then I felt a weight press down on the mattress beside me, like a parent's hand, as they lean in for a goodnight kiss. It was at that precise moment I realized I hadn't heard the door actually open. My eyes shot wide. Standing over me was a man. I can still see him with chilling clarity. Pitch black hair, a long, crooked nose, an aging, gaunt face with thick, dark eyebrows, and a scornful, almost sneering scowl. He was illuminated as if by a flash of lightning, though the night outside was clear and starless. The final detail I registered, before my gaze darted desperately towards my bedside lamp, was the black raincoat he wore, glistening faintly. By the time I fumbled the light on and looked back, he was gone. I was drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. The clock read 10 minutes past 10. If it had been a dream, it was the quickest I'd ever fallen asleep in my life. But it hadn't felt like a dream. That night was merely the overture. One hot summer day, I was in the basement, escaping the heat, and browsed the internet. It was around 3:45 p.m. when I heard the front door open upstairs, the distinct sound of my dad arriving home from his early work shift. "Hey, Dad," I called out, running up the basement stairs. No reply. I turned the corner into the main hallway leading to the entrance. Empty. The door was unlocked, though, so he had to have come in. "Dad," I shouted again. Our first floor had a sort of open, rectangular layout, with the stairs in the center. There was a large mirror on the wall between the front door and the garage door. From this mirror, you could see back down the hallway I'd just come from, and also a sliver of the staircase leading to the second floor. After calling for my dad again, I caught his silhouette in that mirror. He was standing behind me in the hallway. It was possible. He could have circled through the living room, dining room, and kitchen to end up there. But he'd done it with an unnerving silence, avoiding the creaky floorboards I knew so well. I turned around again, smiling. "Hey, how was your day?" In a split second, the figure was no longer in the hallway in the mirror's reflection, but on the stairs, heading up. An optical illusion, I reasoned, but that didn't explain how he'd avoided the familiar screech of the third step, the telltale sound of someone ascending. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. "Dad?" I asked again, my voice unconsciously lower. No answer. The dark silhouette continued up and out of sight, towards my parents' bedroom. Every instinct screamed at me to get out. Warning bells blared. But I'd seen a man, heard the door. It was my dad's arrival time. Yet my body knew something was wrong. I ran up the stairs and peeked into my parents' room. I saw the silhouette of a hand, just a hand, pulling away from their dresser and moving towards their walk-in closet. I don't know why the hand was the tipping point, but my brain finally caught up to the danger signals. The thought shifted from dad to burglar. It's a strange thing, to be undone by the sight of a hand. It wasn't as if I could identify my father's hand in a lineup, but in that moment, I no longer felt safe. I backed away quickly into my own room, heart pounding, and grabbed one of my decorative swords, a relic of a teenage fantasy, but reassuringly sharp. I unsheathed it, closed my door slowly, quietly. Fight or flight. I chose fight. It seems absurd now that I didn't immediately think to call for help, but this was before every teenager had a cell phone, and the only landline upstairs was in my parents' room. I stood there, hands trembling, listening. I could hear footsteps pacing the hall, then a muffled voice as if someone were on the phone, with pauses for replies. Who was he talking to? Did he know I was there? I shouldn't have called out. Then, silence. I crept to my door, listened. Nothing. The house felt empty again. After what felt like an eternity, I cracked the door open. Hallway clear. Stupidity and teenage bravado taking over. I slowly went room to room, sword held ready. All empty. 20 minutes later, the front door opened again. This time, it was my real dad, calling my name. He'd been caught in traffic. We searched the house together. Nothing out of place, nothing taken. To this day, I don't know if that was a relief or somehow more frightening. I know what I saw. If my dad hadn't unlocked the door the first time, then who had? The eeriness wasn't confined to the house. One snowy night, a friend and I were taking a shortcut, a dimly lit path behind an outdoor mall. I stopped, looking at the pitch-black, starless sky. "Weird, it's too dark," I commented. Instantly, a gust of wind dislodged a massive icicle, feet long, sharp as a knife, from a tree about 20 meters ahead. It didn't just fall, it shot towards us, defying gravity. We froze. Just as it was about 2 feet away, it banked sharply to the right and stabbed into the ground like an arrow. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw it deflect off something unseen. Then briefly, under the tree where the icicle had fallen, I saw him, the man in the black coat, just standing and staring, before vanishing. Physical marks began to appear in the house, too. One day, near the light switch by the basement stairs, close to that dreaded laundry room, a red crayon handprint materialized on the wall. It was larger than my hand or my sister's, the fingers thicker, longer, like a man's. My sister and I knew neither of us had drawn it. Our mom had strict rules about drawing on walls. Around the same time, a fist-sized dent, disturbingly shaped like a small skull, appeared in another wall. My mom, oddly, seemed unbothered by either, not even making us clean the handprint. The laundry room remained a focal point of unease. My friends, without me ever mentioning my specific feelings about it, all admitted it creeped them out. One night, in a fit of teenage daredevilry, 5 of us locked ourselves in the tiny, unfinished room, turned off the lights, and waited. Within a minute, a friend shrieked, "Something just touched my leg." No one admitted to it. Panic rose. I fumbled for the light switch, then the doorknob, but my hands met only empty air, as if the room's dimensions had warped. Another shriek, "Something's got my leg!" Finally, my hand found the cold metal doorknob. We burst out. The friend who'd been grabbed pointed back, screaming, "Did you see him?" When the door opened, there was a man standing in the corner. I flicked on the light. The room was empty. My friends never went near it again. The last incident occurred just before we moved, 5 years after arriving. My sister was counting her library books. One went missing from a pile, then reappeared, then was definitely gone again. As she fretted, I went to get lunch. The microwave, after counting down to 0, inexplicably started up again for another 3 minutes. Later, in the basement, we found the circular glass light shade from a ceiling fixture shattered across the floor, sofa, and table. The metal ring that held it in place was also on the floor. It couldn't have just exploded mid-air and rained down in that pattern, nor could it have fallen with the ring still attached to the ceiling. And we hadn't heard a thing. My mom suggested an air bubble in the glass. It didn't explain the ring, but at least she didn't blame us. That was the house's sick goodbye. We moved a month later. I've often wondered about that place, barely 25 years old at the time. Hardly old enough for a long, dark history. Why was it like that? I'll probably never know. All I know is that something was seriously, inexplicably messed up with it. I live alone now, in a nice, safe condo, and thankfully, I haven't experienced anything weird since. Looking back, the signs were all there. Small unsettling flags I, in my naivete, dismissed. It was my first apartment, and the landlord, Greg, seemed almost unnervingly eager for me to move into Unit 311. The rent was a steal for the area. The apartment itself, immaculate. The whole process from viewing to moving in took less than a week. Such deals, I've learned, always have a catch. Apartment 311 was pleasant enough initially. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. Ample space for me alone. It even came with a few generic paintings, saving it from the usual emptiness of a new rental. The only off note was a faint, musty odor that would occasionally waft through the living room. A couple of weeks in, things started. Small objects would be misplaced, snacks vanished, the fridge door left ajar. It only happened when I was asleep, making me question my sanity. Sleepwalking, perhaps. I couldn't afford security cameras, so I tried to ignore it, blaming my already poor sleep habits, which had worsened in the new place. Sleep paralysis, a rare visitor before, now became an almost weekly ordeal. Usually it was just the inability to move, a crushing weight on my chest, and a vague sense of a presence. But in apartment 311, it evolved. One night, paralyzed, I saw my bedroom door creak open. A bald man, his skin pale and flaky, peeked in, his eyes, dull in the moonlight, fixed on me. A forced rictus grin stretched his lips over chipped yellow teeth that ground together. He was skeletal, naked, covered in sores and filth. He tiptoed closer, his hot breath reeking of that familiar musty odor. His gaze filled with a silent, burning hatred. He just stared for what felt like hours, then slowly retreated, closing the door. I called in sick, terrified. After searching every inch of the apartment and finding nothing, I clung to the hope it was a vivid hallucination. The visits continued during subsequent paralysis episodes. I named him Jimmy, a silly name to try and lessen the terror. He never touched me, just stared. It was a small mercy. Then I found a photograph under some papers. 2 women I didn't recognize. I got the previous tenant's number from Greg. Her name was Rebecca. "Hi, Flora," I said. "I'm in 311 now." "I think you left a photo." A long pause. Then urgently, "You need to get out of that apartment. You're not safe." I laughed nervously. "A joke?" "No," she insisted. "Things have been going missing, right?" "Small stuff." My blood ran cold. "How do you know?" "It happened to us too," she explained. "My girlfriend even saw a man, naked, covered in sores, just like you described Jimmy. We called the police. They found nothing. We think the guy who lived there before us, he disappeared. We think he died there, that it's his ghost. We tried a cleansing. Nothing worked. We just left." I hung up, stunned. The cheap rent suddenly made horrifying sense. I did some online digging. The tenant before Rebecca was Michael Hansen, reported missing 6 months before she moved in. Then I saw his picture. It was Jimmy. Or rather, Jimmy was Michael Hansen, though healthier in the photo. I fled to a friend's place, inventing a story about fumigation. I spent 2 days buried in paranormal research. The most compelling idea was that spirits could be tied to objects. The paintings in the apartment? Michael's paintings. If I destroyed them, maybe his spirit could rest. I returned to 311, a reluctant hero on a mission. I took down the paintings one by one. The last was of a woman in a white dress under a tree. As I lifted it from the wall, the musty odor intensified, almost suffocatingly. Behind where it hung, there was a dark rectangular hole cut into the drywall, about 2 feet square. My mind reeled. Had Michael been murdered, his body hidden in the walls? With trembling hands, I shone my phone's flashlight into the opening. I was braced for a gruesome sight, for decay. Ghosts, in a way, have a certain grim romance, a notion of something enduring beyond death. There was nothing romantic about what I saw. Staring back at me from the cramped, dark space within the wall, his eyes glinting with pure, undiluted hatred, his teeth clenched in that same horrifying grimace, was Michael Hansen, alive, filthy, emaciated, but very much alive. He had been living there, in the hollows of the walls, for months. I don't remember screaming, but I must have. I remember running, a primal flight from a truth far more terrifying than any ghost story. The real horror wasn't a spirit trapped by tragedy. It was a living man, hidden, watching, a predator in the most intimate of spaces. The truth indeed was so much worse. The ad in the school paper was a beacon. Employees needed at local haunted house. $20 a night, over 16. Call Toby. $20. I'd just turned 16. Getting paid to scare people. Sign me up. A quick call to Toby, a mention of my drama club involvement and horror fanaticism, and I had a tryout. Don't show up in some dollar store costume. He'd said, find a cool character, show up 6:30 Friday. My drama teacher let me borrow a Gothic-style black suit. I added some chains, spiked my hair, and spent my meager savings on white face paint and red contacts. Toby was impressed enough. He walked me through the haunt, a converted old barn, and showed me a few spots. The one that caught my eye was a disorienting room with flashing strobes, a chair facing a static-filled TV, creepy piano music, and a warped mirror. I'd share it with an experienced haunter, Chet. Chet was older, maybe mid-20s, and knew the ropes. Our routine was simple. He'd sit in the chair, watching the mirror for approaching guests. When they entered, he'd convulse, kick over the chair, and lunge. As they fled, I'd emerge from a dark corner with a practiced maniacal laugh, banging on a loose tin panel. We terrified every group. It was a blast. During a lull, Chet handed me a crumpled, handwritten list. Rules, he said, his voice dead serious. To survive. I almost laughed, then saw his eyes. 1. If you see a man with his dog and a bucket when you arrive, ask if he's working. If yes, tell him your room. If no, wish him a good night off. 2. A soft, deliberate knock on your room door. Hide under the bed. Don't move or make a sound until whatever comes in leaves. It senses you, but won't look if you're hidden. 3. Don't go outside after 1:50 a.m. 4. A woman enters alone, offers a drink, sip it, politely, but do not accept her kiss. 5. Have fun, but know the risks. This is serious? I asked. On my life, Chet said. Your spot's open because the last guy didn't follow them. The first night ended uneventfully, rule-wise. I ran back from the parking lot for my forgotten jacket and heard it. A soft tap, tap, tap at our room door. Rule number 2. I dove under the bed. The door cracked open. Heavy work boots thudded. A gravelly voice. Oh boy, a new feller. We're gonna have fun. Then closer. I know where you are, little cowboy. Better not let me see you. I saw overalls, then a grotesque pig mask. He eventually ambled out. I'd wet myself in terror. I almost didn't go back, but the rules, if followed, were supposed to keep me safe. Right? Next shift, pulling in, I saw him. The man from rule number 1, by the road. Unnaturally tall, stringy hair, with a mangy coyote-like dog and a bucket I dared not look into. Going into work today, sir? I managed. No, he rasped, a slow, unsettling grin spreading. Not today. All right, enjoy your night off. Thank you, Jack, he said. He knew my name. Inside, I told Chet. You asked him if he was working, right? Chet pressed. I nodded. Good. He was one of the first here, helped build the place. Some say he's not entirely human. Toby knows. The rule is he doesn't like surprises. If he knows you're here, where you are, he won't have to... Well, he just doesn't like surprises. The haunt's main sound system roared to life, cutting him off. The night was busy. During a break, Chet lit a cigarette in our room. Thought we couldn't smoke in here, I said. He shrugged. So the pig man? I asked. You met him already? You're lucky he didn't see you. Knock, 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 under the bed again, both of us. Come out, little cowboy, the pig man roared. The door exploded inward. Chet clamped a hand over my mouth. Is he hiding under the bed again? Snorting noises. Closer. Oh, cowboy, I see you found old Chet. Tell him, Chet. Tell him what happened to the last guy who didn't hide so well. Suddenly, the haunt music blared. The pigman cursed and sprinted out. I'm quitting, I gasped, once Chet pulled me out. What happened to the last guy? Houston? Chet's face was grim. Houston. He thought he could fight him. Stood up to the pigman. Well, that's why your spot was open, Jack. After the pigman was finished, Houston was just gone. Vanished. I heard it all. Then why stay? Record, Chet mumbled. Only job I can get. Plus, a dark glint in his eye. The thrill. Same as you, right? It's fun. I understood, perversely. But I was done. I went for my jacket. A woman glided in, stunning. White dress, bare feet, a serene smile, holding a small steaming cup with a root sticking out. Rule number 4. You look like you could use this, she whispered, her voice like music. I took the cup, remembered the rule, and sipped. Earthy, sweet, then violent nausea. I stumbled out, retching. The world went dark. I was on a beautiful starlit path, visions of my life swirling around me. She was there, radiant. She caressed my face, drew me close. Her lips neared mine. Do not accept her kiss. I pulled away. Her beauty shattered. She became an ancient hag, screaming, "This is what you wanted?" The beautiful world burned, replaced by the pigman chasing me, snorting, "Come here, little cowboy." He grabbed me. I woke up on the floor, covered in vomit. Chet was there. If I'd kissed her, I croaked. "You never wake up," Chet said flatly. "She keeps you in that dream, but she only seeks you once. You won't have to drink again." I stood, shaking. "I'm going home, Chet, now." I turned to the door to escape this madhouse. Knock, 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 software deliberate. From the other side,